So you want to buy a cocaine farm. The plan is simple. You find quiet land, far from any road, you plant coca. You wait for the leaves, you cook them down, you press out the kilos. Then you sell into the most profitable supply chain on earth, the one where a single plant multiplies its value 15 times between your field and a street corner in Chicago. Money isn't your problem. You've already decided. You want in on the one crop where the numbers themselves look criminal, because the margins are. Let me show you how this actually works, and why it almost never does. Here's the strange part. A kilo of cocaine leaves your jungle lab worth about $2,000. That same kilo, once it reaches the United States, is worth $30,000 or more. 15 times the money. Identical white brick. On paper, the gross margins on this crop run 500, even 1,000% over cost. There is no legal business on the planet that prints like that. Not oil, not gold, nothing. And yet, by the World Health Organization's own numbers, the average hectare of coca, the actual unit of this fantasy, grosses about $1,500 a year, against costs of $2,000 to $4,000. Do the subtraction. The most profitable crop in the world loses money for the person who grows it, before the cartel takes a single cent. That's the paradox. That's the trap. A business where the math guarantees a fortune and the person doing the farming still goes broke. So here's what you're about to learn. 4 things: where you'd actually plant it, and what it's worth at every rung of the ladder, where the money really comes from, and I promise you it is not the plant. The bill nobody warns you about, and exactly who you're paying it to. And finally, the reframe. Why the highest margin farm on earth is also the single worst seat in the entire business. Money isn't your problem. Staying alive and solvent is. Let's go shopping anyway. Cocaine farms don't come in a catalogue, but they do come with 2 menus. Where you grow and who you sell to. Get either one wrong and the whole thing collapses. Start with where. If you're doing this in Mexico, and increasingly people are trying, you have almost one option: Guerrero, specifically the hills above Atoyac de Alvarez, about 900 meters up, which turned out to be just barely high enough for coca to survive. There are stray plots in Chiapas, a few in Michoacán, but understand, Mexico is a marginal country for this plant. The altitude is wrong, the rainfall is wrong. Traditionally, this is a transit country. The cocaine moves through it, it doesn't grow in it. What's happening in Guerrero is an experiment, and experiments get found. Now the good news, the land is free, not cheap, free. Illicit coca doesn't sit on farmland you buy with a deed and a handshake. It sits on remote public land, or communal land, taken by coercion and worked by people who weren't really asked. Your acquisition cost, the number that bankrupts a normal farmer before he even plants a seed, is 0. Hold on to that. It is the only genuinely good number in this entire video. Next menu item, yield. How much cocaine does 1 hectare actually make? Here's where the fantasy and the reality tear apart. The World Health Organization puts it at 0.9 kilos per hectare per year, less than 1 single kilo. That's the global average, the sober number. But the Mexican army, after raiding an irrigated plot in Guerrero in 2021, claimed 5 to 7 kilos per hectare. Same plant, 7 times the output. One of those figures is a spreadsheet and one is a sales brochure. And you don't find out which one you bought until harvest day. And now the part you actually came for, the price ladder. 1 kilo of cocaine. Watch what happens to it as it walks north. At the farm gate right next to your lab, it's worth about $2,000. Carry it to the US-Mexico border, and it's $12,000 to $15,000. Get it across into American wholesale, and it's $20,000 to $30,000. Ship it onward to Europe, and it's $35,000 to $40,000. And broken down into grams on a street corner. $120 a gram. That's over $100,000 a kilo. For a brick you made for two, same product, every rung. And it wasn't always priced like this. In the 1980s, a gram of cocaine on an American street ran about $800. By the 2010s, mass production had crushed that down to $50, $100 a gram. Lately, it's crept back up, around $81 a gram in 2021, as enforcement squeezes the supply. The price breathes. It moves with every seizure, every crackdown, every good and bad year at the border. One more thing the ladder hides: timing. Coca isn't like the opium poppy, one harvest and done. In Guerrero's climate, it can be cut several times a year, all year round. Which sounds like a gift until you remember it also means your field is green, visible and cookable 12 months out of 12. There is no off-season to hide in. So notice something. You are standing on the cheapest rung of that entire ladder. The real question was never how high it climbs. It's why you're nailed to the bottom of it. To answer that, we have to talk about where the money actually comes from. Here's the thing nobody tells you about cocaine. The plant is almost worthless. Let me say it again, because your entire business plan lives or dies on it. The value is not in the coca. The value is in the border. Easiest way to picture it. Think of that kilo as a sealed courier envelope. What's inside barely changes the whole trip. Same powder, same weight, same chemistry from your lab to that street corner. What multiplies the price over and over and over is how many checkpoints it's crossed, how many men with guns it's survived, how many chances it had to be seized and somehow wasn't. Nobody in this chain is paying for the powder. They're paying for the risk it was carried past. You carry it past exactly one step, the easiest one, the cheapest one, and you happen to be standing on top of it, unable to run. Now look at what your money actually buys, stage by stage, because this is a real assembly line. Stage 1. Cultivation. That's you in the dirt, growing leaf. Stage 2. Paste. Roughly 125 kilos of coca leaf gets chopped and soaked with lime, cement, gasoline and ammonium sulfate, then mashed down into a single kilo of crude coca paste. 125 to 1. Stage 3. Refining. That paste goes to a jungle lab and gets cooked with acids and kerosene down to about 0.85 kilos of actual cocaine at 85% purity. And you're feeding something like 150 kilos of leaf, weeks of labor, and a shed full of industrial chemicals into the machine to get under a kilo of sellable product out the other end. Stage 4. Transport and security. Now the risk begins. Fuel, vehicles, bribes at every checkpoint, cartel enforcers moving the brick along controlled routes by land, by sea, by air. Stage 5. Wholesale. The brick reaches the border or a national market, and suddenly it's worth $12,000 to $15,000. The cartels take their biggest bite right here. Stage 6, retail, smuggled into the US or Europe, cut, broken into grams, sold on the street for the price of a used car per kilo. Now go back and find your part. Stages 1, 2, 3, growing, mashing, cooking. The 3 stages with the most labor, the most fixed location, the most chemicals, and the least value added. Every dollar of that 15 times markup gets created in stages 4, 5, and 6. The moving, the crossing, the selling, the parts you don't do and can't control. You built the thing. They move it 3 feet across a line on a map and triple the price. That's the entire business in one sentence. So, you'll pull your kilo, maybe 2, off your hectare. Now let's talk about what it cost you to get there, because the bill starts running long before the profit does. Okay, the land was free, nothing else is. Let's build the bill for 1 hectare, 1 year, before you've sold a single gram, line by line, fertilizer and pesticide, because coca is still a crop, and crops still get sick and eaten. $100 to $300. And this is the heavy one. Coca is a punishing plant. Constant planting, endless weeding, harvest after harvest after harvest, because remember, it doesn't stop. Call it 5 workers, 20 weeks, $5 a day. That's $1,000 to $2,000 a hectare, and it's the single biggest operating cost you have. Irrigation, a pump, because on marginal ground the plants die without water in the dry months. Another $100 to $300. Then the chemistry. To turn leaf into cocaine, you need lime, cement, gasoline, ammonium sulfate, sulfuric acid, ammonia. Industrial reagents, moderately cheap on their own, $100 to $200 a hectare. The lab to run them through, the tanks, the filters, the plastic barrels rusting in a clearing, $200 to $500 more. And transport and security. The fuel, the vehicles, the bribes at every checkpoint just to get product down off the mountain, $500 to $1,000. Add it all up, $2,000 to $4,000 a hectare every single year, just to exist, just to stand still. And that's the easy part of the bill, because now come the 2 costs that actually decide whether you survive. Neither one shows up on an invoice. Cost 1, the cartel tax. You do not operate here for free. Nobody does. In Guerrero, avocado farmers, legal, boring, law-abiding avocado farmers, hand over 10 to 20% of their crop just to be left alone. You are not growing avocados. Coca growers pay far worse, up to 1/3 of their entire output. 20 to 50% of revenue gone to the same organization that is simultaneously your landlord, your only buyer, and, the day you get clever, your executioner. It is not a fee, it's a leash with a price tag. Cost 2, the bulldozer. Everything you just spent. The labor, the chemicals, the lab, the whole year of your life can become a pile of ash in a single afternoon. In Guerrero, in the first year, the army found and destroyed about 4 hectares. Then tens of plantings after that. There is no insurance for this, no compensation, no appeal, no claims line, no payout. 1 helicopter spots 1 green patch on a hillside, and your entire annual investment becomes a photograph in a government press release. So notice what's missing from this bill. Profit, not a dollar of it. You've spent thousands. You've taxed yourself to a cartel. You've bet your field against a helicopter. And on the average hectare, the meter has already sprinted straight past everything the crop could ever possibly sell for. Which brings us to the question that probably should have been the first one. With a 15 times markup sitting right there at the border, in plain sight, why does the person who grows it keep going broke? Cocaine farms fail for 100 reasons. But two mistakes show up over and over, and here's the uncomfortable part. You are about to make both of them. You almost can't avoid them. They're built into the seat. Mistake 1. You sell at the source. Go back to the ladder. That kilo is worth $2,000 at your lab and $30,000 plus in America. You, the grower, capture the very bottom rung. $2,000. Roughly 1/15 of what the brick will eventually sell for. And for that 1/15, you take the part of the job with the dirt under it. The labor, the fixed address, the crop that cannot run when the helicopters come over the ridge. Everyone above you took a cut for moving the risk. You took a cut for growing the plant, which is the single job in this whole chain that can't be hidden, can't be relocated, and can't be denied when the army is standing in the middle of it. Smallest slice of the money, largest slice of the risk every time. And it's often worse than even that, because you may not be selling finished cocaine at all. A lot of small growers sell their output as raw paste, or base, one step short of the pure product, and that trades for less than $2,000 a kilo. Drop below the bottom rung. The research is clear. The grower sees only a fraction of the final value, with the rest skimmed off by the people who move it. So you're not really standing at the bottom of the ladder. You're underneath it, holding it up. Mistake 2. You grow where you can be found. And here's the math that kills most of these farms before a cartel or a cop is even involved. The average hectare yields 0.9 kilos. At a local price of $2,000, that's about $1,500 of revenue. Your costs were $2,000 to $4,000. You are underwater, on paper, in a good year. Before the bulldozer, before the cartel's cut, before one single thing has gone wrong. The research is blunt about it. Production in Guerrero, and I'm quoting, is not yet profitable when cartel demands and seizure losses are counted. That is the careful academic way of saying the trial runs lost money. All of them. And then, on top of the loss, the cartel still takes its 20 to 50% of whatever's left. So even the rare winner, the irrigated fantasy hectare that actually clears a profit, gets skimmed right back down toward the bone. There's a third force working against you, and honestly, it's stranger than the first two. Nobody actually knows these numbers. Not really. Not even the experts. There is no official Mexican figure for coca yield or for farm cost. None. The cartels who control the fields have every reason on earth to lie about them. The government press releases inflate their own raids. The entire economy gets reconstructed out of seizures, guesses, and journalism, and half the analysis quietly borrows its numbers from Colombia, because Mexico's own data barely exists. Think about that. You are about to invest your freedom, and possibly your life, into a business whose fundamental economics are a fog. Even the people insisting it's profitable are, at bottom, guessing. So who actually does this? Who's standing in that field? Meet your workforce. You're not going to get a name, because the people who grow this don't get names. Picture the person actually standing in the coca field in Guerrero. He's not a kingpin, he's not getting rich, he's a smallholder, sometimes paid, sometimes simply coerced onto land that got quietly taken, working the crop for about $5 a day. He does the planting, he does the weeding, he does the harvest, and the next one, and the one after that, because the plant never rests. He handles the leaf. He breathes the gasoline and the acid fumes inside the lab. And the thing he's growing will be worth 15 times more the instant it clears a border. He himself will never cross. He keeps almost none of it. The cartel above him takes its share of the revenue. The movers take their cut for the risk. He gets the day rate and the exposure. And the exposure is the part every spreadsheet leaves blank. Kidnapping, murder, a Mexican prison, extradition to the United States. The research describes these as risk premiums reflected in cartel taxes rather than transparent fees. Read that sentence again slowly. Your life is a line item, and it's buried, unlabeled, inside somebody else's protection payment. He is the cheapest input in the entire operation, and he is, by a wide margin, the most disposable one. That is the seat you are actually buying when you buy a cocaine farm, not a plantation, not an empire. That, the $5 a day man in the field who can be replaced by lunchtime. Now, finally, let's do the math you came here for, both versions of it. Time to pull it all together and answer the real question. If you own a cocaine farm, how much do you actually make? 2 scenarios. Watch how far apart they land. Scenario 1. The optimistic case, the fantasy hectare. You've got the good irrigated ground and the Army's 5 to 7 kilo yield, call it 6 kilos. At the local price the raid itself put on that plot, about $2,100 a kilo. Your hectare is worth around $12,500. Push it harder. Sell nearer the border instead of at the farm gate, and the high case gets you a gross around $11,400 on the pure product, against a floor cost of a couple thousand. Net at the absolute top end may be $9,400 a hectare. But look at how many ifs are holding that number up. If you hit the fantasy yield, if you reach the border price, if the cartel takes a small cut instead of a large one, if the bulldozer never finds you. 4 ifs, and every single one of them by itself can drop you straight back to 0. Scenario 2, the realistic case, the honest hectare. The WHO's 0.9 kilos, at the local 2,000 a kilo. That is $1,520 of revenue, against $2,000 to $4,000 in cost. You lose somewhere between $500 and $2,500 per hectare, and that's before the cartel's cut, before a single raid. That's your result in a calm year where absolutely nothing goes wrong. So here's the swing. The same crop, in the same country, in the same year, runs from plus $9,400 all the way down to minus $2,500. A $12,000 spread on 1 hectare, decided almost entirely by 2 things you do not control: how much your plants happen to yield, and whether you can get product past a border defended by 2 national governments. The research puts its own range on it, flatly. Net profit, minus $2,000 to plus $9,400 a hectare. Read that as what it is. That's not a business plan. That's a coin flip with a prison sentence stapled to one side of the coin. And here's the quiet insult underneath all of it. Even the good outcome, that $9,400, your best possible year, is a rounding error next to what that exact same kilo earns for the people upstream of you. You bet everything you have to, on average, lose money. They bet a single border crossing to make 15 times your finest year. Same brick, different seat, and even that best year is generous to you because it assumes you pocket the whole gross. You don't. As the grower, you see only a fraction of the final value. The cartel's cut, the mover's cut, all taken before your hand ever touches the cash. Average the good years against the bulldozed ones. Subtract the people standing above you, and the honest expected outcome was never the 9,400. It was the loss. So if you still want to buy a cocaine farm, here is the one thing to remember. You didn't buy a farm, you bought a seat. The cheapest, most replaceable, most dangerous seat in a $30,000 supply chain, the one seat that can't move, can't hide, and gets both bulldozed and shot at. The plant, meanwhile, does its job perfectly. It takes 1 hectare of ordinary ground that would grow maybe $1,500 of coffee, and turns it into a brick worth $30,000 plus on a corner in Chicago. Flawless. The crop is honest. The chemistry is honest. The 15 times markup is completely real. You just capture the first 2,000 of it and every last ounce of the risk. And here's the part that should genuinely sting. That same hectare, planted with legal coffee, pays about $1,500 a year, with nobody trying to kill you, jail you, extradite you, or set your field on fire from a helicopter. And on the World Health Organization's yield numbers, the cocaine doesn't even beat the coffee. You heard that right. You took on the cartels, the army, the DEA, and a life expectancy measured in raids, in order to underperform a coffee plant. Mexico even runs a government program, Sembrando Vida, whose entire pitch is basically, please, just grow literally anything else. Because the value was never in the plant. It was never in the growing. It was always, only in the crossing, the borders, the risk, the men who move the envelope and never once touch the field. That's where the 15 times markup actually lives, and it is the one part of this whole business you will never, ever own. So if you're determined to be in cocaine, don't own the farm. Own the border.